Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this morning to express the extent to which I'm proud of my constituents in southwestern Connecticut and Connecticut's 4th Congressional District, but also to observe that just as in this country we have work to do in addressing the racial disparities that exist in all of our institutions, we have work to do in Connecticut's 4th District. I was enormously proud that after we began to bend the curve on coronavirus, thanks to the leadership of our Governor, Ned Lamont, just as we saw those numbers begin to decline, like the rest of the country, my constituents were appalled by the brutal murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Nobody was unaffected by what we saw that day. And to the great credit of my constituents, people rose up in the broad diversity of my constituency. My constituency includes some of the wealthiest small and, yes, very white towns in the country, towns like New Canaan and Darien. It also includes diverse cities that struggle with the issues of urban poverty, Bridgeport, Norwalk, and Stamford. But as one, my constituents rose up, young, old, poor, wealthy, black, white, straight, LGBTQ, and demanded progress and change. And they did it peacefully. They did it side by side with the leaders of the police department, of Stamford, of Wilton, of New Canaan, police chiefs standing side by side with Black Lives Matter protesters. That was a good thing. That was an example about how we come together in the face of something awful. But I also rise because there is no room for complacency. I remind my fellow citizens of Connecticut that while we are a progressive state and while we did come together in all of our communities, it could happen here. I remind my constituents that Connecticut was actually the last state in New England in 1848 to eliminate slavery. That's just a few years before Abraham Lincoln did so in the South and around the country. So there is no place for complacency amongst my constituents. And the truth is, as I have observed, and as many of us have observed, what happened to George Floyd is the pinnacle atop a structure of 4 centuries of racism and discrimination. And of course, George Floyd is not alone. The names echo in a chamber of shame in this country. Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Ahmaud Arbery, the names echo and they go on and on. But those Black Americans who have been killed unjustly sit atop a structure of the denial of equal access to opportunity. And that is in our systems of housing, our systems of education, and in the private sector. So even as I celebrate and express my pride in my constituents, we need to be there for the broader struggle. We need to be there as we consider how we make one of the more segregated parts, at least with respect to housing, of the United States more fair. We need to be there when we contemplate the fact that too many of our Black and brown brothers and sisters don't have the access to the extraordinary educational institutions in the state of Connecticut and around the country. We need to be there. It is good to show up and protest peacefully when a Black man is murdered at the hands of the police, but it is not enough, because that act sits atop an edifice, a 4-century-long edifice of discrimination, the effects of which still echo through every aspect of our society. So it's not just my constituents, it is this chamber and this Congress that must get serious about addressing the unequal distribution of opportunity in this country. That is our mission. I just said goodbye with so many of my colleagues to John Lewis. I know that's what John would have us do, and I know that he would have us do it with grace and with dignity and humility. That's what I charge my constituents with, and that's what I hope this Congress will address in the memory of John Lewis, who just left us this morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.